Welcome to our channel. We're excited to announce that a sneak peek of our latest Structure and Structure Gantt free training course is now live. Learn how to master advanced work hierarchies and effortlessly visualize your projects on a timeline. Ready to level up your project management? The link to this free course is right there in the description. Hi and welcome to this Structure and Structure Gantt free training. My name is Mark Lewandowski, and by the end of these sessions you will know exactly how these tools can help you to organize, visualize and plan your work more effectively. So before we tackle the how, let's dive into the why. Why are these tools so important and why do we need tools like Structure and Structure Gantt? Well, Jira is fantastic at managing team-level work, Scrum boards, Kanban boards, and individual projects. But we all know that real-world work rarely stays in one box. Jira users typically struggle when it comes to cross-project visibility, rigid hierarchy, or real-time roll-ups. Don't get me wrong, it is doable within Jira, but standard Jira has its limitations. And in some cases, for example, when you want to organize your work into programs or portfolios, you will need Jira Premium, and that means extra cost. Structure is designed to solve these three core problems. It gives you a flexible spreadsheet-like blank canvas inside of Jira where you can finally see the big picture. It also allows you to manage your resources in a way that Jira doesn't really handle that well as allows you to report on any area of your project using the customizable fields and formulas within Structure. At its heart is a live hierarchical list of issues that you define. You can bring issues from any Jira project and arrange them in any hierarchy you need. It syncs with Jira in real time, and I'll talk about the synchronization in one of the next sessions, but it also addresses other challenges Jira users face. So for example, if you want to create a report or a timeline view of a particular area of your project that's managed by a specific team and you want to generate a report of the progress or the amount of work that the team is working on, or for example, check whether your team members are overutilized or underutilized, all that is possible with a couple of clicks using Structure. This is what we'll be doing in the following sessions, but let's start from the very basics. So in the next sessions we will create our first structure, we'll discuss the ways of working or modifying the structure, we'll talk about the synchronization of structure data and Jira data, we'll then talk about adjusting the views to our needs and presenting or planning your work using a timeline. Also, we'll talk about resource management using Structure so that we can manage resources in form of assignees or teams or other custom fields used in Jira. Let's get started. Welcome back to our Structure and Structure Gantt training. In this session, we'll create our first structure. But before we do that, let's have a look at the sample data I've prepared, which we'll use for this exercise. So I did create a Jira project. It is a Scrum project, so we have a backlog and sprints. I've also created several stories and a couple of epics, so now we have a set of sample data and we can proceed to create our first structure. So to do that, there are a couple of options. I will be using the Structure app, although you can do it from this view as well. You will find Structure hidden here under the More drop down, but I will be using the other option, meaning I will access the Structure app first, and right now Structure will open the last structure that I worked with. But in the side panel you will also find the Create Structure button. So let's hit this button and let's proceed to the next step. So creating your structure is pretty straightforward. This is done in 3 steps and Structure will walk you through these steps. There are 2 modes, speed mode and power mode. We'll focus on the simpler one, which is the speed mode. So let's select the speed mode And as you can see, there are 3 steps. So the very first step is to decide which data from Jira you want to include in your structure. You can select multiple projects. Our first structure will only include a single project, so I did create a dedicated project for that, called it Structure Training Project. Let's select it and let's move to the next step. Here there are 2 things that Structure asks you to do. The first one is to modify the source data that you want to pull into Structure. So again, I have my project and I can go back to the previous step and add more tasks or narrow the list by applying filters. So for example, if we want to focus on specific issue types only, or maybe we want to look at only tasks that are in to-do or in progress status categories or statuses, this is also doable, but do not worry about this, as you can modify your structure at any time. So I will leave this filter empty. There are also additional filtering criteria that you can apply, or you can switch to JQL and simply type your JQL query that will filter out your Jira work items. I will not be doing it for now, so let's move on to the next section. Here, Structure gives you a basic hierarchy that is a common one when it comes to agile projects. So we have our epics on the very top, and we'll have our child issues. Doesn't really matter what work type it is, it will nest it under the correct epic, just as I've created in my sample data. So let's hit continue and let's move to the next step. Last step here is to name your structure and add some description for your colleagues so they will understand why was it created, what they can expect when accessing this structure. So I will call it my first structure, and also you can decide whether you want to share it with anyone. So you can keep it private, so only you will be able to access this particular view, or you can share it with other users, groups of users, or specific project roles. I don't want to share it with anyone, at least yet, so let's hit create and move on to the next view. So well done, your first structure is created. Now I do have my Gantt module enabled together with the resources panel. Let's hide it for now. We don't really need it yet. And our structure is created. So I have 2 epics that I've created and several stories nested under the epic. Well done, you have created your first structure. Now in the next sessions we will modify this structure as well as explore the interface of the app, so you know how you can visualize the different data within your Jira. I'll see you there. Welcome back to the Structure and Structure Gantt training. In the previous session we created our first structure, and in this session we'll get familiar with the app's interface. So let's have a look at the screen, and in the top left corner you'll see a drop down which allows you to navigate between the different structures you have created. Now you can mark your structure as favorite, and when you do that your structure will show up in the favorites list in the structures side panel. Now speaking of the side panel, if you expand it, you'll see that there are different apps within the Tempo suite that we will not be covering in this training, so let's collapse this. You can search your structures, create new structures, view all your structures in form of the list, and display structures that you've added as your favorite. So far so good. Now structures also have their configuration, so if you click on the config button you will be able to change the owner as well as add some description, just as we did when creating the structure. Let's close this pop-up. Now there are other options. You can save your structure as a new one, so making changes to the configuration, to the views, to the scope of the structure, by pulling in more data, by grouping it, and so on and so forth, can be saved as a new structure. This way you will have both structures, and you can also compare these 2 structures when you click on the split button. So this way you'll be able to compare 2 different views, and this would be your 2 different structures. Now there is also the export option here. You can export to Excel, or you can export the Gantt chart, and you can share your structure or change the permission settings so that other users can view, edit, modify the structure, as well as control, which includes changing the permissions. So I won't be doing that. Let's close it. Now in the top right corner you'll have a couple of buttons. You'll have the main view, main layout, which we are looking at right now. So your structure, already discussed split layout when you can compare two structures. You can enable the Gantt chart or the timeline. We'll talk about it later. And there's also the roadmaps feature, which requires a separate app, which we will not be covering in this training. Now that you're familiar with the structure apps header, there is also another one which allows you to modify the structure. So we are back to the configuration screen, to the initial configuration. Again, we'll be covering this in more detail in the next session. We can search the structure, filter or group the data, as well as adjust the views. So some of them are predefined for you. I do not have that much of data. We'll work on that later. So there are some predefined views for you, and you can customize what you see on that list by adding different Structure and Jira app fields. So for example, you can create custom views for different purposes. We already have some predefined views for planning, for tracking, for data entry. This will allow you to update your Jira issues directly using this interface. Now you can also update them in Jira, and all the changes will be reflected within Structure because there's bidirectional synchronization of your data, but we will discuss this in more details in the next session. So I'll see you there. In this session, we'll discuss the resource management in Structure. Now, Structure allows you to manage your resources in different ways. So let's start with defining what a resource is. A resource can be a Jira user or the assignee. It can be a group of Jira users. It can be a team, or it can be a specific field's value. So you can have a dedicated field for your non-human resources, such as equipment, rooms, some apps with limited licenses, and many other things. So let's see how we can configure that, as this is the first step required to make use of the resources panel. Now, to enable the resources panel, you'll have the show resources button. So let's hit that. And in one of the previous sessions, I already addressed the topic of resources, but let's have a look at the configuration one more time. So if I go to the Gantt chart settings, you'll have the resources tab, where you find the resource assignment, and I am using the assignee field. Now if I disable this, you'll see that the resources are not showing, and I need to go to the Gantt settings to fix that. So let's go back to our resources and select the assignee field. Once I select the assignee field or tell Structure how I define the resource pool, it will look at all the assignees and add them automatically in this resource section to my resource pool. There are also some additional settings. So for example, default resource settings or units. In that case, a unit represents how much work can be done by this particular resource. So in general, units equal to the amount of people represented by the resource. This is a use case when you, for example, have subcontractors for whom you don't want to create all these different user accounts in your Jira, so you can just create a single account and make it represent a team of 2, 5, 10 people, and so on and so forth. So I will keep it to 1. There are also the calendar options. There's also the maximum units as well as leveling priority, so we can define how Structure automatically adjusts the timeline or levels your resources. Make sure that there are no over allocation conflicts, and it looks at the leveling priority in order to do that. I will show you that shortly. So let's hit save. Let's have a look at our resources. Now I have myself and Anna assigned to some work. If I assign story number 2, let's say to Kate, she will be also added to the resource pool right away. Although this task is a milestone, so let's disable the milestone, and there is Kate. Alright, so what happens next once I assign some work? When I have an estimate, like in that case, original estimate is 1 week, 1 day, 2 hours, let's change it to 1 week. and let's hide the baselines as they are obscuring the timeline. The duration of the task is 40 hours or 1 week, and it is shown within the resources panel as I'm looking at the hours, right? So I can switch to percentages, and I see that Kate in our example is fully utilized starting from Tuesday to Wednesday, week 45. So far so good. Let's go back to hours here, and that's pretty straightforward. Now if I decide to change the estimate, let's say to 2 weeks, I can also do it by editing the time tracking value by clicking on the task. You'll see that it changed to 2 weeks and the task was extended, and now again we have an even distribution, or my resource is fully utilized. But what if Kate can spend only 50% of her time working on that particular task because she has some other assignments, maybe working on some other project? Well, I can click on Kate. I can actually use this filter as well to focus only on Kate, and now I can edit the resource settings for Kate. So first of all, Kate's units are set to 1, meaning that her capacity is 8 hours, is the standard capacity, but I can change this, and let's say that within this month Kate will be working only part-time, 50% on that particular project. So I can add such a period. And what happens now is, since the capacity of Kate is 4 hours, the task assigned to Kate was stretched so that within November, up till the end of November, she'll spend 4 hours working on that task, 50% of her time, but starting from December, full-time, 100% of her time, meaning 8 hours. So if I switch to percentages, you will see that she is fully utilized in both of these months. Alright, so far so good. Now, what happens if we have over allocation warnings? Well, let's try to generate such a warning. So if I look at myself, well, I don't have that many tasks assigned to myself, so let me move this task a little bit to generate such a warning. And right now I have a task of 1 day and another task of 3 days, so I am over allocated on the first day. Now what can we do here? Well, during one of the previous sessions I showed you how resource leveling works, so you already know the answer to this question. If you haven't watched this video, please do so, as auto scheduling and manual scheduling, these are very important concepts. Now what can I do here is of course manually move this item, but that would work well if I have a couple of tasks to manage. If I have multiple tasks, it might be quite challenging to do so. So can the tool do something for me automatically? Yes, it can. It can automatically level my resources or make sure that the workload is even and my resources are fully utilized. But you might wonder, okay, but how it would know how to schedule these tasks? What would be the criteria? And the answer is simple. When you click on the task, you'll see the leveling priority. So by default it equals to 500. So let's say that we want to make sure that this story number 5, as it has a lower priority, and that's just an example of this rule. So let's say it's gonna have a lower priority, let's say 200. Okay, so I've set the priority. I can also add this field to my as a column here to see what is the leveling priority, and now the priority of story 6 is higher. Let's run the leveling. Now when you level your resources, you can decide whether you want to level it for everyone or for selected users only. So let's run it for everyone, and whether you'd like resource leveling to apply to manually scheduled tasks or tasks that are already in progress or completed tasks. So that's what I would do. And now since story 5 has a lower leveling priority, it was pushed forward.